Alright, so this is definitely gonna be my weirdest intro so far. Also, it's golden hour, so I respect that. But I did a video with Colby Guy of Florida Hockey Now, and the intro entirely got messed up. The entire first 20 minutes got messed up. Uh, so that's unfortunate. Colby's been one of my good friends for many, many years now. So we were reviewing Panthers cap friendlies because he's a Panthers writer, as I said, for Florida Hockey Now. Unfortunate that we lost the first 20 minutes, but makes it a shorter video, which isn't the end of the world, I guess. So yeah, I'll plug everything Colby's social medias in the description below. Thank you to Colby once again for coming on, and without further ado, I guess let's get right into the video. All right, so whenever you're ready, we'll pick a third cap friendly to look at.
All right, let's see. This one has a interesting amount of trades.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's look at this.
Experimenting with some one-for-one trades. Vitek Vanacek brought in. Interesting.
All right, so this one has to have a decent amount of trades because, I mean, these are pretty smart amounts on Giroux and Marchment.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, we need to see how they were able to bring them back. And that Mammon contract looks pretty good, although I'd see Mammon getting around 1 million rather than 7.5K or 750K. I'm sorry, but other than like these cap hit numbers, I think are pretty fair for all these guys.
Yeah,
Carlson, I think, would be closer to 1 million, but I don't think he'd complain getting anything. But I think he'd be closer to 1 million, even a little bit more. Losterinen, I think you'd probably see him more in the 1.25 to 1.5 range. Vanacek, I think that's pretty fair. But let's see. Bennett for Gerard, 1-for-1. I mean, it's a decent hockey trade. Would Colorado do it? Depends on who they bring back and who leaves in free agency. If they lose Nazem Kadri and a decent amount of forward depth, they could potentially make that trade, but they have $25 million in cap space, and they will be able to make something work with one-year deals if they need to save some money for Nathan McKinnon's extension. But they have a lot of money to work with, so they don't necessarily have to be pressured into making that deal. And then you go to this Bobrovsky for Vanacek trade. I personally believe that you would have to, send another draft pick or something to make this more enticing. They don't have a lot of draft picks necessarily, so maybe you add a prospect to it.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
You either have to add something else or retain more money.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I could see Washington being a suitor for Bobrovsky if he is dealt. Obviously, since hopefully they really haven't been able to fill the goal in. Samsonov's not that guy. I don't hate Vanacek, though.
Yeah, so that's a decent hockey trade. I think that would get it. I think Washington is a team that would look at getting Bobrovsky. The package that would get it done Florida might need to give up a little bit more to get rid of him, as we've seen with teams trying to dump contracts. But Bobrovsky is a guy that could make the Capitals a better team, and if they could find the deal, I think Washington's a pretty good landing spot for him. Then you go with Montour for Stanley. I mean, that saves Florida some cap hit. Sure. I think Montour's a really good player who he's a really good offensive defenseman who can quarterback that second unit. He's done a pretty good job of it in Florida. Logan Stanley, I mean, that's a move that can get them some cap space, but I don't really know about the realism of that happening or that actually being a thing.
I doubt it.
Sure, I don't really have much feelings about that.
Stanley's is tall. He's good, but like Montour's been very good for you guys since you got him from Buffalo or Anaheim. Buffalo, right?
Buffalo.
Yeah. He was on Anaheim before that, though.
And then this Hornquist to new. I have to look into if that no movement clause is like completely waived after he got traded to Florida. That he waived it to get to Florida or not. But I don't think Hornquist would accept a trade to New Jersey if he was given the option to.
Not many people would. It's New Jersey, to be fair.
You also might need to give up more than a fourth to get rid of that contract, but
more than likely, and it would be what's they called coming back rather than a seventh round pick. Whatever they call in the NHL, a player to be named later, or
literally just no return. I've seen in the isn't they just say no return in the Andrew Ladd trade?
Yeah, basically.
All right, let's look at how this guy has the lines looking. Anton Levchi on the first line. That's something that I wouldn't necessarily think of when he was brought in. I think he has a lot to prove during training camp, but if he can work into the lineup, then sure, I think he can. And if he has a good camp and make the roster, I think he'd definitely be a good depth piece to make up for the loss of a Mason Marchment type or a Claude Giroux type, because I mean they wouldn't be able to bring back both of these guys if they don't make any moves to get rid of that cap space.
Fair.
So if Marchment and Giroux are both gone, I think it's definitely very fair to say that Levchi does get a chance in the lineup. Where it's going to be, I don't know. It's very interesting to look at that first line though, and I think that maybe it does have a potential chance of being put together somewhere down the line, but opening night, not sure. Second line, Huberdeau, Lundell, Duclair, I think that is an interesting look. I think you also might want to look at putting Giroux on that line and keeping... Because Marchment, Lundell, Reinhart had extremely good chemistry throughout the season. So if you have a chance to keep that line together and you have a guy like Claude Giroux who also has chemistry with Jonathan Huberdeau, I think you'd rather keep those middle two lines together as much as you can and have Duclair be on that line instead of Bennett, where Giroux's at his natural position at center, but sure. And then that fourth line, and I don't agree with putting Grigory Denisenko on that fourth line. He's too skilled of a player to be put on the fourth line.
That's fair.
Well, looking at defense, I mean, based on the moves they made here, I think those top two pairings look incredible.
Yeah,
I mean, putting Weegar in his natural right spot where he's comfortable. Samuel Girard, Aaron Ekblad, it's a good pairing. Gustav Forsling, one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. The way he skates, the way he moves the puck, I think he's an incredible defenseman. So, I mean, if they were able to make the moves they made in that, in this, I think Girard Ekblad would be incredible. And that bottom pairing, it is what it is. I mean, they brought in Logan Stanley, but I mean, I can definitely see Lucas Carlson being a better option at points. So it's whatever. But the goaltending tandem, I think that's fine. And Spencer Knight, I think he's ready to take that next step, and he is a guy that can handle it. And with Vanacek being his backup, I think that's a comparable NHL goaltender tandem for sure. So, I mean, looking at this, I don't really have too many issues. I mean, Levchi, I need to see some work from before I say he's ready to be that first line player. But you've seen Barkov play with guys like Maxime Mammon on that top line, and Marchment had opportunities on that first line before he broke out. So maybe it could be good for Levchi to work with Barkov, and Barkov is a guy that could make whoever he's playing with a better player. So, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with it being a potential option they have this season.
They also do have $4 million left in cap space, which is uncommon for the Panthers cap friendlies. We haven't seen that much cap space around. Obviously, that's because of the Bobrovsky move and the Hornquist move. The only thing I disagree with is having Denisenko on the fourth line. He's not a fourth line player. So, again, you could add a guy like Trevor Lewis, in my opinion, and that's a perfect fourth line. That's a really good-looking team. Besides, like, if you move people up, like, I know theoretically Reinhardt's not going to be on the first line because he worked really well on the third line last year, But if you take, I don't know too much about Anton Levchi, but let's say theoretically you put Reinhardt on the first line, Denisenko on the third line, and then you throw Trevor Lewis on the fourth line, maybe. If it all works out, it would look really nice on paper, but
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even if Levchi doesn't really work out, you put Denisenko on that first line and you give him a shot with Barkov. I think Denisenko could definitely benefit from that. Or even you put Duclair on that top line, you play him with Huberdeau, and I guess, in my opinion, you'd use Giroux, but Lundell could very much benefit with being from Huberdeau too. And I mean, at points when guys were injured or Sam Bennett was suspended, the Panthers did try to put Lundell with Huberdeau, and the pairing did work out. So, I mean, there's not necessarily a wrong answer with this group, and the lines could definitely change from day to day for sure.
that's fair. Let's do one more cat friendly before we wrap it up here.
Alright, let's try to find one that's, like, extremely ridiculous.
The one right there you're looking at.
Yes.
I see an Islander trade.
Washington, there's an Islanders trade. Let's look at this one. Alright, so that Losterinen, right off the bat, I'm looking at Losterinen's contract, and that's something that I agree with. I think that's a good number. 3 years, 1.5. That's a number you'd want to keep him at. I agree with Losterinen's contract. It seems like a lot of people have a good handle for what they would expect Losterinen to get. Vanacek, sure. I mean, we'll see what this version of the Bobrovsky for Vanacek trade is. Mammon, I think that's a good number. You keep him at 3 years, $1 million. Yeah. Marchment, that's a decent number. Giroux, $6 million is a good number. I see people with 5, 4.5, but anywhere between 4.5 and 6, I think that's where Giroux's going to want to sit if he wants to stay with a contender. Mm-hmm. Tyler Mott at 1.8. I mean,
not happening.
He did a good playoff run. I don't think I'd have him at that high of a number. I'd keep him more closer to 1.5, but I mean, sure.
He's probably going to get around 2 for how good he was in the playoffs and with the Rangers if they don't keep him.
Oh, yeah, true. The general managers love to overvalue players who have a good playoff run. So, he probably could get paid more than that. I have him valued a little bit less than that. So, maybe that is a fair number if he wants to sign with a contender like the Panthers, and he's kind of using that. These bad teams are giving me a bit higher numbers than you would want to pay me, so let's kind of meet in the middle here. Mm-hmm. I guess that's a good place to be at with that negotiation, but let's look at these trades. That's what we came here for.
Yep.
So this first one, they're giving up both Montour and Bobrovsky for Nick Jensen. They're only giving up a 5th here.
Well, it's a 3-way deal.
Oh yeah, so they're giving up Cole Schwint here. That's a decent ad for Arizona. He played pretty well in his few NHL appearances. He's still pretty young. Sure, third. I mean, I think that's fair enough. And you get a prospect from Washington for doing that, too. All right. So, that's all. I think that's
a lot to take in.
It's a lot to take in, but it's not necessarily something where I'm like, this is completely bonkers. It's so stupid. Like, no, it's not what I'm looking at here when I see it. It seems reasonable.
Fair.
I think it's pretty reasonable. Maybe you need to give Arizona a little bit more. Maybe Arizona would want to take out a little bit more if you give him a pretty good package for it. But I think that's a fair deal.
Yeah, I mean they're only taking $2 million, so them getting 2 third-round picks and a prospect, that's not bad. Montour for Jensen's interesting. I don't like that too much for Florida, but I mean Jensen's not a bad player. But I just like I like Montour as a fit there. It could work. I could see that happening.
Yeah, I could see it. I could see it working. I mean, if you need a clear cap space, and I think as good of a player Brandon Montour is, I think he definitely could be a victim to the cap crunch, and Washington would be a team that he probably would play well on. So, I mean, taking back a guy like Nick Jensen to be a cheaper option on the blue line, sure. But let's get into some of these other ones here with Patrick Hornquist for a 5th-round pick to Anaheim.
Gonna have to give
I
up
mean,
more.
Anaheim's desperate for a guy that can change the culture, and Hornquist is willing to go there. I think a 5th-round pick would be decent, but usually when dealing with big contracts, you're going to want to add assets rather than you're not really getting anything back. You're going to have to give something up for a team to take a contract on. But Anaheim's like really desperate for a player to change the culture, and they want to stick out and be like, hey, we'll give you some minimal asset for this guy instead of making you take something on or making you give us something for it, then sure. But that's about it.
Yeah. That next one, though.
The thing with this Anthony Duclair trade is that you want to get at least a 1st-round pick for him. He has a little bit more time on a very team-friendly contract. And after the season he had, where he's a 30-goal scorer, he has more years on a team-friendly contract. He's a fast guy that could really pick up the pace of your team. I think Florida needs to get a 1st-round pick back for him. And I don't think this trade is a fair deal for Anthony Duclair. I think you'd want to get a 1st, a 3rd, and a B-level prospect for Duclair, in my opinion. I don't think that the Panthers take this deal.
I also don't think they're going to get a 2023 first, though, because these 1st-round picks, especially for a team like the Islanders, who are up in the air with if they're going to be good or not, they're not getting rid of their 1st-round pick unless it's like for a guy like Jacob Chikrin, in my opinion. Because, I mean, with this draft class, you got Bedard, Michkov, and other guys that makes it very loaded. 2023 1st-round picks are going to be a little bit harder to come by than, let's say, previous years.
Yeah, but Florida being a team that doesn't necessarily have many draft assets for the next 3-4 years, I think getting a 2024 first is even an improvement from this offer, especially because the 2nd-round pick they're getting is a 2024 second.
Fair.
So it's you would rather get the 2024 first than a 2024 second.
Yeah.
And then bringing back Dmitry Kulikov, I mean, this ownership group or this management group isn't necessarily as tied to Dmitry Kulikov as past management groups, but I mean, guys like Barkov and Huberdeau know the guy, and he's a decent enough defenseman. So to bring him back on a 4th-round pick, I think, sure. I'm not raging against that trade. I think if you want to improve defense, especially after trading away Brandon Montour, bringing back Kulikov is not a bad move. Well, will Minnesota give him up for just a 4th-round pick? Not exactly sure, but sure. And then let's look at these lines. So right off the bat, the first thing I notice, although you're going to call me stupid for being so nitpicky about it, you got to put Ryan Lomberg in the lineup, dude.
Yeah.
He's earned that spot.
I agree. I like Lomberg a lot, honestly. I used to make fun of him, but no, he's really proved me wrong since the Tampa series of last year. Or 2 years ago.
Yeah, he's a gritty guy. He has some speed to his game. He has chemistry with Luostarinen, and if you keep Hornquist around, that line was very good together. and I think he'd have no problems mixing in with Tyler Mott too.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very viable option there. And I mean, if you're looking to put Mammon in the lineup, and Grigory Denisenko isn't necessarily ready, I think you could stick him on the first line with Barkov and Verhaeghe. That was a line the Panthers used, and you could use Huberdeau, Bennett, Giroux, which is a line that the Panthers used a lot last year. So there's some nitpicky things there, but overall, I don't really have too many arguments with the forward group. Like you got that third line back together. Really like that third line. Any mix of that top six could be fine. Of course, you can move Reinhardt up to that second line and play Denisenko with Marchment and Lundell. That's fine. Or you can put Mammon in the mix, or you can. There's a lot they can work with there.
Fair.
And of course, Paul Maurice can find a line combination that works better than some of these that Burnett used. So there's a lot on the table. But there isn't a whole lot to complain about there. Tyler Mott works pretty well for the fourth line. And, I mean, maybe if he shows signs of being something pretty good, you can play him in the top 9. Who knows? Mm. But he's proven to be a pretty viable option. So, I mean, for a Hornquist replacement, not terrible. But looking at these defense pairs, why in the world would the Panthers play Dmitry Kulikov over Gus Forsling, dude? Yeah. This makes no sense. Like, whoever made this is like completely undervaluing Forsling, and both is like, he's a very good skater. He's good on both sides of the ice. He's one of the more underrated guys in the league. You're not playing him on the third pairing. And even, like, I just moved that Forsling-Gudas pairing up from the third to the second pairing, but I don't know, man.
It's not terrible. It's not great, though.
Yeah. Like, you're not playing Forsling on the third pair.
No.
And, I mean, we already talked about this Knight Vanacek goaltending tandem, so we don't really need to spend much time on it. But as I said before, that works.
Yeah, I think the Mott move on the fourth line would be interesting. I think him, or as I said before, twice now, Trevor Lewis would be perfect there. Other than that, I mean, they do have some cap space. I still don't like Jensen for Montour. I really don't think you have to do that when you have $2 million left in cap. I know you have to re-sign Huberdeau next year, but that's a different story. And going just for a 1-year playoff run, I'd rather have Montour than Jensen. But Jensen's deal is expiring, so I do see that. But other than that, do we have any final comments before we wrap up here?
Yeah, now that I look at Jensen's cap space, you're only saving $1 million by not bringing back Montour. So, like, there's no point in that unless Washington really doesn't like Jensen and they want him gone now. I don't really see the point in that from the Panthers' perspective.
The other thing is Giroux for 4 years. I don't think you guys would do 6 times 4. You could, but then, like, you're really handcuffing yourself with Huberdeau. So that's kind of there. Yeah, but that's also money you're saving from the Bobrovsky contract, so maybe you can afford to do that. But, I mean, getting rid of Duclair to make this all happen is kind of... I think you'd rather keep Duclair around than bring Giroux on a 4-year deal and potentially have him, like, kind of drop off. I think you'd rather bring back Giroux on maybe a 2 to 3 year deal, maybe even a 1-year deal, but you'll have to see about that. That's fair. I think that's what we're going to call it for this episode. We're definitely going to have you back on the channel very shortly, so I'm excited for that. We'll think of some cool ideas, either Panthers or just hockey related, and we'll run them through. But thank you for coming on today, Colby.
Yeah, no problem.
Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.